Okay. Boom. We are alive today, ladies and gentlemen. We have a wonderful guest for you, Paola Santana. She is the CEO of Social.glass. She was a Fulbright scholar and graduated from the George Washington University, as well as the Singularity University. She's been featured in CNET's Top 10 Latin in Tech and Forbes Top 50 Women in Power. Paola, it's such a treat to have you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm so jealous you're living in that amazing lush jungle, if you want to call it like that. I'm in a rainy day, which I love in San Francisco, but I'm doing great, and I can feel all the good vibes that you're sending me from your jungle.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. I know when we're building business, it's a lot more effective to be in the heart and center of everything. And that's where you are in Silicon Valley. So I guess with this let's just dive right in. You're the CEO of a company called Social.glass. So tell us, what is Social.glass, and how did you get to this particular part in your life?
So Social.glass is, the best way to describe it is a software ecosystem, a family of products built for government, to empower government to self-transform, to operate like high-performing entities. And how do we do that? Three things that are very complex on the background, that basically we are digitizing, streamlining, and scaling processes and decision-making in government. So imagine a suite of products like the Google suite of products. You have Gmail, Google Calendar, Google Docs, Google Maps, and all those products talk to each other. They are embedded into each other. They integrate. They have the same feeling, the same intuitiveness. And when you're using them or adopting them, you don't feel like you are doing anything new. You don't feel like you need to train them. You're just like, swiftly continue a flow of things and continue a flow of usage of something that helps you manage your life or your business. So imagine that government today doesn't have that easiness of experience. Everything is like patch with patch with patch. Like government has a little bit of Microsoft, a little bit of Gmail, SAP, Oracle, and a little bit of something they developed in-house. And when you pack all of that, it doesn't work even within departments of the same agency, and it doesn't scale. So the question is, how can we eliminate all that manual work that governments do? Because we have a highly specialized workforce that when they retire, they're out of business, and then we need to train other people again. When we are doing super complex stuff outside of government, and we're barely getting trained on those stuff. How can we embed that user experience into government so governments can make more complex decisions faster, just because they have the tools, the software tools, to empower the people behind government to make these decisions? So that's what Social.glass is, an ecosystem that makes it very easy to make different decisions, from purchasing decisions to project management decisions to managing people, HR related decisions, in an intuitive way, in a swift way, so government can, I would say, simplify all that they do so that they can make faster and better decisions over time.
So at the Arcane Bear, a lot of us are libertarians, or I guess even to some degree anti-government. And I think one of the reasons that is, and what you just brought up there too, is that private companies have a much easier time in scaling because their business models are profitable. Whereas, taxation from a lot of our followers, and myself included, we consider this a type of theft because we don't have any real control over the say in what gets done. So I guess you could say that governments are broken. Do you think that there's actually the possibility to solve some of the inherent problems? Because I know by nature, we're looking to create new governance models because it's needed. So how do you feel that this helps solve some of the issues in the government models that we have?
Well, the thing is that I absolutely agree with you that the difference and the driving force behind corporations and governments and other type of organizations is the sustainability bit. So if you cannot have a sustainable model in which you can create wealth and revenue so you can continue furthering your vision, by definition, you are a black hole. And black holes are not sustainable. And that's what we've seen over and over and over again. So, it's very easy to criticize the power of enterprise, but what have they earned? Creating solutions that are adopted and used daily by daily people. So what can we learn from that? We can learn a lot of things for government. Number one, governments have a very interesting nature because they need to um, take care of public goods, take care of public services, do the things that are um, for for everyone and are not tasked to anyone specifically. So, when you have that mixed nature, how do you make sure that you are collecting, for example, taxes and making sure you're allocating those taxes in the right buckets that are the ones that will benefit all of us and not just a group of us and not just the elites? So one thing is the thing that government should do, the goal of governance itself. And another thing is how we get there. And we always get stuck in the mechanism. We always get stuck in the system, thinking that the system is the goal. The perfectioning of democracy is not the goal. The goal is the perfectioning of how we live and how we make decisions as humans and how we maximize all our talent and our resources. That is the goal. Whether we do it through democracy or some other more sophisticated type of government is up to whom? To us. We cannot create rules that then are bounding us and then are making us look slow, stupid, and like we don't know what we're doing and we don't know how to manage our stuff. So, Social.glass attempt is to first understand what's happening. I think there's a lot of perception what's happening. There's a lot of noise about what's happening, but there's very little insight into what's happening. What is insight? Data. Not OpenGov data, actionable data. So how did we spend the money on public healthcare this year? Did we know that if we allocated in these 3 hospitals versus these 3 policies would have been different, would have been prevented X amount of surgeries? Do we know that if we would have managed this healthcare workforce better and granted these type of benefits and not this type of benefits, we would have had this or that? We don't know that. We are making policy decisions that by definition are based on economic studies that were done 5 years ago or a very specific limited amount of data. And we then package that data and say, based on this, we're making this decision. That's not the best way to make decision in modern world. We know that modern world, everyday decision, we're taking that and enterprise is maximizing that and making decisions next day. This is why we have dynamic pricing. This is why we have AI and machine learning. Even machines are learning every day, but we don't. We package information from 5 years ago, make it into a policy and implement it 2 years later. That tells you that the way we are making decisions as humans for all of us, for the public stuff, the public sphere, is not dynamic enough, it's not flexible enough, and it's kind of obsolete. If you ask me like, what's the next thing after that, I won't tell you it's a patch on democracy, because I think that maybe what we need to do first is do a step back and think if we need to rethink the whole system, to rethink not just elections, but are we voting for people or for projects or for things? Are we voting every 4 years or are we voting every year? Do we want to vote? Should people in California vote for things related to people in Miami? What is your level of proximity to the things you're voting about? And what is your level of education to the things you're voting about? So when you put all of that on the table, it's not that I want to be questioning everything for the sake of protesting things. It's that I want to question things so we don't continue building layers and layers over stuff that is not definitive. Because we can rethink the systems and do a step back. So Social.glass is that attempt to start catching data, getting data into what's happening. Every time a government start using one of our tools for decision making, we capture that little decision making. Every time government starts buying something big or small through our platform, we can understand better what they're doing, what triggered them to use that specific money in that specific way for that specific agency in that specific region. And then we can say, oh, from your small budget, you spend $150 billion buying printers. Why are you buying printers if you can just contract printing services that add half of the cost? This is not just data that is sitting there. This is data transformed into insight, transformed into a decision making of cutting budget on printing and putting that budget into something else. So that is the power of seeing first what are we doing before I go into creating systems and figuring out what the next thing is. I need to recognize that the way we do business in government is suboptimal. And then I need to say, what are my solutions? What are my proposals? And with the data we're gathering from Social.glass, that is what we aim to see. That is what we aim to, have a light at the end of the tunnel. So I totally agree with you on how obsolete our government system structure is. However, where we are going next, we need to create that. And I think that because we haven't done the homework of envisioning what is next, and we've been putting like patches over democracy, we don't know where to go after democracy. Of course, countries that are, in totalitarian or dictatorial regimes, they know where to go next. They have the option of democracy, whatever sort of democracy that is, representative, whatever that is. But people who is already on democracy, where do we go after? That is not necessarily more freedom, because in most countries we have freedom, but it's a freedom that is different, that is smart freedom, that, it's smart liberties, where we do our part and then government does their part. And what are these parts? So I think we need to rethink that. And I think Social.glass is the first step towards understanding that without rushing into a conclusion, because we are not there yet.
Yeah, Paola, this is actually one of the spaces that really interested me too about, if you remove the idea of blockchain and just go with the simple aspect of decentralization, one of the problems that you brought up is, well, governments are generally reactive instead of proactive. They have very little ability to see the future coming. They're reacting to the future having already happened and creating laws from there. And also the municipality idea that, should we have these voting structures where your vote might affect someone that lives in a totally different community, and that community might have different views or beliefs. And this is kind of one of the weird and abstract parts about consensus, just in general. Consensus has no relative fact. If a group of people in one area decide that they want to vote to believe that the world is flat, they're given the opportunity to do that in a consensus model, because if they all agree with each other, then that becomes their truth. And I think one of the interesting parts about decentralization is that it seems more likely that the structures of government work better at smaller scale, because you have a community or a municipal relationship with the people that believe this particular type of thing, or whether it's maybe they're using ganja for recreational and religious purposes or whatever it might be, and then to allow these communities to interact much more freely, as you had pointed out. And one of the reasons why I think our point here is so interesting is that we're at the point now where, as we write this code and technology for governments or governance structures, it's one of those really dangerous lines where if you build a governance structure that can be controlled specifically from a centralized point, then tyranny and dictatorial ends are not that far off, because hierarchies can be climbed by power and ruthlessness. They're more usually climbed by competent behavior and conscientiousness, but that doesn't mean they can't be corrupted. Anyway, so the point of this is, I think it's really important that a lot of people are focused on the next, where governance is going next, because as a society, our moral, I guess our moral structure has been our governance models up until these more recent points. So I guess my next question is, how do you see the people that are interested in power? Because we know that people that are generally interested in power are not necessarily uncorruptible people. How do you feel the removal of the people that are in power and the replacement of that with this type of technology looks like? What is that? Does this next government integration look like a kind of like a Facebook type thing where I can vote on my bridge or the road that I want to get built with this type of idea? Does it look like a social platform almost?
So let's like take some of the concepts that you've briefly mentioned and scale them a little bit back. So I think there is a trend for, let's talk about trends. On demand. On demand is a trend, and it means I cannot plan for everything I need. And that means I cannot plan for everything I need forever. So I'm making better decisions little by little. So that is a very specific trend. The other trend is proximity or local. The reason why we can do on demand, one of the reasons, is because you are more connected to the things that are locally surrounding you. So these things can be connected to you in a shorter amount of time. And by definition, that doesn't mean global. It means smaller. It means local. It means knowing thy neighbor. That's what that means. That means that you are connected to the things that are close to you, where you have a natural liaison with this type of people or neighborhoods or businesses. So that's a whole trend. And the question is, why is that trend happening? Because it's natural. I think that things that are unnatural, that are artificial, cannot stick in time unless we embed them and make them organic and make them part of our daily thing. So this goes totally against a global social network, because a global social network doesn't create that actual proximity. It creates a perception of proximity, just like some of our government systems. They create a perception of power and a perception of we are handling things and a perception of we're in control, when that perception, when that reality doesn't exist. We are not really understanding what's happening. We know our budgets are not being maximized and used to the best extent possible. So I wouldn't even go there to say, is a global network where we all vote all the time on the things we care about? I don't know. I just think that the trends that are there is more intuitive, more close, more daily, and smaller in nature. So I think that local governments, because they are connected to the people, and they are not only connected to the people, and they're accountable to the people, more direct accountable than someone in Washington, D.C. making decisions, or someone in your, in the capital city making decisions that then are imposed on you. These governments will have to be at the forefront and will need to be repositioned as the center, not of control, because people that is in local governments, if you look closely, these people are so connected to their communities. They don't have control because they don't have power because they were voted to have power. They got to power because people love them and push them to take a leadership position. And this is the whole difference between people that is in DC, for example, and the people that emerge as leaders in their local communities. So I think it's all about smaller, it's not bigger. It's about local, not global. And this is where solutions like social.glass blending, we don't want to think that we will have machines coming and taking over the decision making that can be made by a human. We want to understand that these machines and these enhancements will come and maximize what a human being can do, what a government worker can do. So it's all about bottom-up change, and it's nothing about top-down change where the people in command, the people in charge, come and dictate what needs to happen for everybody that is under them. So what does that mean? I don't think a machine will come and take over and say, this is what needs to be done by, all my government workers. It's government workers in their daily decision making using this tool saying, oh, this makes more sense, or oh, I'm saving $30 if I make this decision, or oh, I am fulfilling my policy of buying from small businesses when I do business with this veteran-owned or this women-owned business. So it's them on their little decisions, making the best decisions they can on their daily decision-making routines without having an Obama or a Donald Trump coming and telling them, this is how you need to behave and this is how you need to run government. So when you have that type of smartness in small decision-making, in small daily things, I think that we can disconnect politics from public administration, like politics, the noise of politics and saying who is in the administration, from the people that are actually executing the administrative tasks of government, and we can empower those that are doing the work of government. So for me, it's a very simple, straight line of enhancing these little people, these heroes that are behind the government workforce, as opposed to give more power to the people that are, usually making abuse of the power that they have on behalf of the people.
Right. Yeah. It seems to be one of the difficult processes is that, I don't want to dive into anything too controversial here, but for instance, the United States government on their bankroll there's some absurd trillions of dollars missing. And what's difficult is that unless there's real accountability for some of these mistakes built into the system, the relationship between banks and governments have been, or at least apparent to some degree of apparency, have been one of collusion towards more of a crony capitalism, which is governments are writing laws that are more lenient if corporations to be able to get away with things like, for instance, one of the things that's always really upset me, and one of the stories that kind of highlights in my mind is that BP oil, I don't remember what year, they had a big flood of oil in Peru, and now there's been generations of Peruvian indigenous people that have basically been growing up with different types of cancer or leukemia. And all BP oil got was a $50,000 fine. But I know when I lived in Guatemala, if you pull something like that in a small community, that your heads would roll. There's no time in jail. These are deaths. These should be death sentences for some of the people that are at least in charge. And I think one of the difficult parts of governance, and one of the reasons why we do it, is because we kind of want to pass not the torch but the guillotine to someone else to do the dirty work. And again, it just leaves this abstract area where, you know, the dirty work involving money and critical decision making for what might end up be someone's livelihood, or I guess the loss of that life, is such a power to hold. I guess
but we delegate it. And this is the interesting thing. It's like governments are the biggest decision makers in the world, and governments are the biggest purchasers in the world because we granted them that power, right? So when you grant and delegate a power, but then you want to act like if you didn't do that, the question is, how can you delegate power and ensure that governments are making the best decisions on your behalf? And to do that, you cannot create a system that is so complex that you need to be constantly monitoring, because in the first place, you wouldn't have delegated. So this is why overseeing what a government is doing in Miami, for me that I live in San Francisco, makes no sense. It makes no sense because who am I to tell the people in Miami what's best for them? I can share with them, like, this is how we've managed to improve our sanitation system in San Francisco with this type of weather, with this type of people, with this type of income and of workforce. But I cannot impose that. And it's the imposition on artificial constructs that is weighting us down as opposed to advancing us. And again, we go to the whole concept of, can we improve big systems when we cannot improve little systems? Can we improve big things and big decision making when we cannot make good decision making on the little things? And this is the exact concept that Social.glass is trying to push forward. Our first product, for example, one of our first experiments, that's the way I want to call it, is trying to solve procurement. So procurement is decision making in action. It's like you say, from all the decisions government can take, they're taking decisions that are affecting not only your pocket, but your opportunities to live and thrive every day, because that's where they decide to put their attention. And by consequence, that's where they put their money. That's where they put your money. So one of the biggest forces of government. And let's say, you know, everybody's focused on how governments are spending their big buckets, how government are spending money on defense, how government is spending money on seal biddings and all these big competitions. But how is government making that same decision on their daily, little, routine decision making, on their small impromptu purchases? We don't know, because all those purchases and all those little decision making go into a big bucket called miscellaneous. We don't have insight into what's happening there. We cannot prevent abuse. We cannot even understand why a government would buy 30 printers the day before Black Friday. It makes no sense for me. It shouldn't make any sense for government. But why are they doing that? Because, you know, purchases under $3,000 are considered small purchases. They're considered micro purchases. And you don't have to put that much thought into them. But when you aggregate them, they're 9% of the budget of government in the United States. They're $150 billion. And that's the number we have because we've been able to dig into that number. When you try to understand the number for governments worldwide, we don't even have that number because we don't even think it's a number we need to put together because it's not a market. Well, you know what? It is a market. And governments are making little decisions, from a government procurement officer to a minister to a new intern or a small low-level staff. They're all making procurement decision making that when you aggregate them, you know you could have improved those decision making on the little scale where you were buying one printer or one simple pack of paper. Can we impose a better system when you cannot have a super optimal system with 3 steps to purchase a printer? Hard. So how can we start making small purchases fast, powerful, simple? So when we go to the big purchases, we don't need to be so, frustrated with the fact that we don't know how to buy big stuff, because we don't know how to buy little stuff on the daily basis neither. So that is the whole concept of it. Let's start making change that is sustainable, that is simple with the small stuff, and over time scale that change to the big stuff. And let's train, or I would say empower, the people that is in government, no matter administration comes in and out, because that's the people that is making these decisions every day. Of course, they're not shiny, they're not the heroes, they're not in the forefront of magazines. We don't care about these people, but you know what? These people I compare to the teachers. They're the ones educating our children. They're the ones like doing the hard work of listening them, coaching them, trying to get them, out of drugs or out of, and gangs. But they're the ones that get paid the lowest, and at the same time they get no recognition for their work. So how can we reposition these people at the top of the pyramid, because they are the ones really behind every amazing government milestone that has been ever achieved?
Yeah, it reminds me of a scenario and maybe a type of implementation. I remember there's a few examples of this, but I remember, so I grew up in Canada. We have quite a different government than the United States, although our government is also going downhill very quickly. But there was an example made of someone was trying to build a walkway down to a park, and the government had build out like this $90,000 bill to their regular contractor, and they had taken 6 months to get there. So this guy decided to go out by himself, and he built the stairs all by himself leading up to it. And it cost him, he wrote down the bill, his hours, it cost him maybe $4,000 in gear and time and stuff like this. And we know that if the average person was given the ability to either say have their community vote on them taking on these contracts, do the work, but the difficulty comes in the fact that this over-residing government has a contract to work with these specific people to make sure that the stairs are at regulated, perfect 45-degree angles, and that there's a massive amount of loss in the fact that there's so much regulation that goes into just building a set of stairs down to the park. Whereas this guy was able to show that he can do it for like 10 or almost 20 times less than what the governments had budgeted out, because they have to go through so much red tape and jump through all these hoops to build out large corporate contracts, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas I think if the municipality had the ability to be like, hey, we're going to vote for this local contractor to build it, I really see that this decentralization and this making governance smaller ends up being a lot more effective. I think you're right. We lose so much in just buying even something just buying printers or building steps. I know one of the big like kerfuffles where I'm from is they spent $80,000 on a logo that's nothing but like a geometric shape. It's like, why did you not go to Fiverr? Why was no one from Fiverr hired?
Well, because Fiverr didn't exist back then, or even if it existed, how would you contract Fiverr? And even if you contracted Fiverr, how would you guarantee that whoever is fulfilling that contract has not been debarred or blacklisted, or is someone that can actually do business with government? So there's a lot of red tape, but I have to say, we have been complicated processes in government and in life just because we get more and more understanding of what works and what doesn't. So there is a big difference between a guy building a stairs in his house or her house, and the stairs being all weird, than if you build that same stairs for access to a public entity, to a public organization, because someone can then say that because of that stair they had an accident or something wrong happened. But at the end of the day, you create this simple process of this is how you should build a stair, and then we say, in case something goes wrong, you should have insurance when you build this stair. And if you're going to be the one building this stair, I want to make sure that I'm using public money in the best way possible. So let's make sure you have not been involved in any crimes or any corruption cases. So for all these things I'm telling you, someone needs to go and do the homework and check if this is happening, or if you got your insurance, or if you see? So there are things over things over things over things. And it's great that we are requesting that in a purchasing process. The problem is that we are requesting so many things, then, the things are there, but we don't even know how to implement them because we got lost in translation. So for example, you ask the supplier for insurance, you ask the supplier to provide warranty from a good or a service they're providing. 3 years later, no one of the people that make that decision to choose their suppliers are around, and then the hospital is broken or something's not working. Do you think we go back to those contracts to enforce the warranty or the insurance clauses? We don't. We don't even remember they're there. Why? Am I going to remember I have a warranty clause for a door? That is under millions of, papers, or, it's a past decision making. I cannot follow. So imagine that our systems, we created rules to allow us to systematize things. And then that systematization buried us into a lot of things that we cannot keep track of. And the question is, how can we go back into simplifying? So there is a value on simplifying. There is a value on regulating. But like everything, over-regulation and no-regulation are the same type of problem. So we need to have some common rules that we all agree to. Again, imposing this, okay, now we know how to build stairs. So let's make sure that the rules for stairs apply to every stair we do in every side of the United States. That doesn't go, because stairs are different depending on the materials, depending on the weather, depending on everything. So again, how can you simplify stuff versus continue adding? You have this body, and then you continue adding amendments and amendments and amendments, and then you don't follow where you are. So there is a point on creating common rules for things where common rules apply. And there is a time to simplify all the mess that we've created. And both things are useful when the time for each of these things come. And now is the time for simplification. If someone comes and tells me that the FAA has no reason to be, regulating airspace and drones, and I will tell you, well, there is a reason why drones are regulated, and it's because we need to maintain our airspace safe. And FAA is not about maximizing profit. It's not about having more airplanes in the air. It's about safety. So if safety means that nothing of what is flying can fly because they don't have the safety requirements, then so be it. Because we're not going to be threatening everyone on the ground and on the air because you have something that is not supposed to be flying on the air. So there is a purpose behind FAA. The question is, when did this purpose become something that is unattained because they have so many rules to comply with that they cannot even do their job right? So that's what we are assessing. How can we understand how you're making decisions little by little so we can digitize those decisions, see them, streamline it, chop what doesn't work, and then say, okay, now this is a simpler way to make decisions. So let's scale this where it applies, everywhere, only where it applies. So that is the room for improvement on the governments we have today. And the hope is that with this insight, with this data, and this improvement in the governments we have today, this is what we call the low-hanging fruit for Social.glass. With all this data, we can envision what's next. It's very difficult to know what's next if you don't know what's happening today. It's very difficult to create the new when you don't have any visibility into how you are messing up today. And that's the power of, doing little things and self-correct as you go. And that's the power of low-hanging fruit and of little improvements. People think that breakthroughs just happen because I went from A to C, and that that's not the way it happens. Even in nature, it's little by little by little by little, and suddenly massive wipeout. But you need to do those little improvements before you get to that moonshot, to that massive groundbreaking change. And that's our bet at Social.glass as well.
So, this is such fascinating discussion, and it's really thick content as well. Like the idea of governance, and the Bear family is big into blockchain and distributed ledger systems. The idea of decentralizing governance, I agree, it just means more empowerment for the people that make these smaller scale decisions. Like if, for instance, my road wasn't painted here in Costa Rica for almost 6 months during the rainy season. And when it's dark out and there's no lines on the road, it's very, very dangerous. I was contemplating I was like, okay, we need 4 or 5 people. We need the string. We're going to go paint the road ourselves. Like I was already tired of it. I was ready to do the government's work myself. And it's always been, okay, I just want to dive into the sweet question here, but I've always been fascinated by this area of governance because the community does a lot of the governance work itself. Like when I lived in an indigenous community, if the police did something the community didn't like, it didn't matter. The community would break down the police doors and they would make their own damn decisions as how they wanted to distribute their justice. This has always been a really interesting area of contention. But what I would like to dive into is, tell us where Social.glass is currently, and are any governments around the world currently, I guess, dipping their toes into testing this type of technology?
Yes. So, we've been working on this for the last year. And in September of last year, we decided to build our first product that is Micro, this e-commerce marketplace that empowers government to make better micro purchases. So we're all about going small, all about local. So what we're doing is connecting governments to local businesses, and not local businesses because we want to be local. It's just because local businesses can do fulfillment much faster. And local business might mean, there might be a Target close to a city hall, and Target would become a local business for those purposes. So we're trying to redimension and redefine what local means for us, but basically is about connecting local governments with their suppliers in a way where they can have access to all the things they would need for conducting micro purchases. Micro purchases, because of the trend has been to increase the threshold from $3,000 to $10,000. So any government agency, usually depending on their budget, can go and do a direct purchase without having to justify or follow any process. Only if they have a government credit card, or in some cases they just go and buy something and get reimbursed. And this can be done by a procurement officer or by a low-level staff or even an intern. So what we're saying is, can we make that process simpler and better? So how do we do it better? Every supplier that is in the system has been curated. We know that their products are good. We are constantly rating their products. We have other government agencies rating the products that they have already bought. So when you are going to buy something, you see reviews from people that matter to you, like not reviews from Paola that is a private individual. You see a review from another government officer that said, I bought this and this was good, but it didn't last more than 2 years or whatever that is. And then, you create this central place where all governments are being fueled to come and look for all these suppliers, and where suppliers can create what we call the micro stores that are where their offerings are live 24/7. So imagine all these small and medium businesses, they don't have the capability to have online stores running, to figure out logistics, to have a designated sales agent going ministry by ministry or agency by agency selling their offering. Suddenly they can just create an online store with a couple of clicks, virtualize all their offering, and receive requests, approve or not, if they have capability and stock to fulfill them, and then be able to basically sell to all the government agencies in the United States, 90,000 government agencies in one simple channel. So I think we are reducing the barriers of entry for many businesses to access a $2 trillion market in the United States. So, that means better business for everyone. There is a disconnect that we're trying to address. So if you see every country's budget, usually they spend between 15 to 20% of their budgets doing purchases. And then we always say, and we know that small and medium businesses are the backbone of our economies. They are the ones fueling our economies, hiring people and whatnot. But we also know that governments are buying most of the time from the typical big companies. So what we're saying is that we have 15% of our budget that is not talking to the backbone of our economy. How can that be if we recognize that they are the ones sustaining the economy? So let's connect them by creating this online marketplace that allows them to talk and interact very easily and to optimize for what they want to optimize for. So in many local governments, they want to optimize for fair trade. They want to optimize for, small businesses, like they want to buy from women-owned or veteran-owned, or they want to buy from, businesses that are committing to some specific degrees or some specific using some elements or not using some elements in a specific community. So can we make it easy for government to vet and filter all these options and then make the best decision, not in one day, not in 1 week, but in 1 minute, and then get it delivered in the next 2 hours? So it's not just it's not a platform to see what's out there, it's to see, decide, and get it right away. And, we've been designing this for a while, talking to government agencies, talking to suppliers, understanding if this is of value. Like, we see micro purchases as a good niche, but again, we had to dig into that. It is a non-accounted problem because people doing micro purchases are usually low-level staff, like, interns that you just go and send them to run errands. So it's an unaccounted problem. It's a problem that someone else is feeling the pain, but when you aggregate it, you see that you spend a chunk of your budget doing them. So we are in the process of piloting this. We spent a couple of months building our MVP, our minimum viable product, that is ready for testing now in California. We're starting in California with California government agencies and suppliers. And we are basically trying to test that whole hypothesis that if you improve decision-making in the small scale, this can translate into getting better quality products and services on behalf of the people. And that is an important can see. And the fastest win to see is that you are maximizing your budget. You did more with the same budget. You did more with less budget. You chose better suppliers that you continue choosing just because, you can see how their reviews are improving. Little things with data. You have an analytics dashboard where you can see how you spend your budget, like 25% in electronics, 25% in emergency purchases that I should have foreseen. So, you start understanding better your data and your spending habits. And we know that knowledge is power. So understanding your spending habits will just improve how you're making purchases, and also create more accountability. I think it's very important for us to go back a couple of years and ask, why did we make these decisions? Why did we buy these things? Why from this supplier and not this other supplier? In the case of micro, we basically take a screenshot, that's the best way to describe it, of decision making in space and time. So when you are given unlimited options for things to buy and suppliers to choose from, why did you choose these or this other supplier? And this is where machine learning and artificial intelligence come in. We are trying to develop this public best value algorithm that is maximizing not for the lowest price or the fastest delivery or women-owned businesses only. It's also maximizing for whatever you have decided that is part of your public policy in procurement. So for example, in the city of Stockton here in California, they are a community that is majorly Black and Latino. And their businesses are majorly Black and Latino owned, but local government is not buying from Black and Latino businesses. And the question is why, if we are majorly, those are the businesses we have in our city. And it's just because either these small businesses cannot compete, they don't have the right exposure, they don't have the right offering. Maybe there's a language barrier for the Latino community. There are many different reasons. But what we are saying is, can we help you advance your diversity in procurement policy by creating online stores to all these businesses that you wouldn't even know they exist? So suddenly, we have a tool that can help you advance that agenda forward, because that's a problem. It's just you haven't been able to solve it. So not everybody, not every town has a problem of diversity in procurement, but they do. And for them, this can mean that that they will start buying from these businesses. And we know if you put the money of the community where the community is making business, it can only mean improvement for the community, for the business, because the business now needs to step up, and for how you're spending that money. And even in the perception of, for the community, how are we improving this community? You're like, okay, we're putting dollars into our local businesses. So this is what we're testing right now. We launched our pilot program a couple of weeks ago. We're heavily engaged and talking and going with them through every phase of the process of onboarding, of understanding better what is that they need, why they couldn't have made this decision before, why are they choosing between these 3 different suppliers, how that decision making gets captured in the system. So in case someone challenges that decision making over time, it happens all the time, like, why did you choose this supplier, not this other supplier? 1 year later, after you've made 1,000 decisions, you cannot remember. But in the case of micro, we captured that decision making, so you can always refer back and see exactly with which credit card you paid, why you choose it, why in that exact moment that price was $1 more, but it was the best option because it was highest quality, or it had insurance, or it had free returns, or whatever it is that it made you choose that decision and not other decisions. And that also works for transparency purposes. Like, you can remember why you did that decision, and you can justify that, and you can prove that for people that want to do the right thing, they can have assurance that we are there having their back, providing the info that enable them to make the best decision on behalf of the people. So that's where we are right now. And we hope in Q2 to basically release our beta, but we're just focused right now on making sure that this product has value for the governments that are using it, and that we can really solve a problem that might not be super apparent, but when you put it all together, you can see how much of your budget has been spent in suboptimal decision making on the small stuff.
Yeah, it reminds me of an idea here. The government, you could basically look at the government as a giant dirty room. So you might as well just pick a corner and start cleaning. This is the low-hanging fruit idea, is that this space needs a total makeover. So the best thing to do is to work on a niche and really try to hone in that communication. So it's fantastic to hear that you're getting footing in California already, starting to work with some of this stuff, because the financial sector and the governance sectors have probably some of the biggest problems in them because of their relationship to the private sector and the governance of the private sector itself. So I want to end off the last 2 questions here by asking you, you're very successful already. You've got a lot of I guess we call it goalposts that you've hit on your life path so far. So how do you stay motivated, and what keeps you pushing to work in these particular fields?
That's a great question. I would say that I am a naturally determined person, so I need to have clear goals, I need to have a vision, and I need to go after it with determination. Passion and motivation are emotions. And as you know, emotions come and go. So when I feel a rush of passion and motivation, I use them in my advantage. And when I don't feel passionate or motivated, I take the time to go slower, but still go. So I'm a deep thinker. I trapped into, I don't feel motivated. So does this mean that I'm not doing the right thing? Should I reassess what I'm doing? Should I change paths? And anything big takes time. And if you are committed to do things that break systems, that change the status quo, that challenges the way we've been doing stuff, not because you're smarter than anybody else, just because you are committed to those things, because for some reason you're passionate about them, you have something inside you about them. You see them in a different light. You have clarity that other people don't have. You have a skill set towards them that other people don't have. Your commitment should be to see these things change and be positively affected by your work in lifetime, not after you die. Not creating things that the outcomes will be seen after, like 100 years later. And of course, there is room for that type of change, for change that takes so much time that you're not even thinking that you will be able to see the impact of this change. But I challenge that, because there's a lot we can do in 24 hours, and there's a lot we can do in a couple of years. It just takes work. And the word is determination. The word is discipline. Doing things no matter what is what we share in our team. Like, is pulling through, is breaking through, the things you don't want to do, is doing the things you don't want to do. It's paying attention to the things you don't want to pay attention. It's pulling through the things that hold you back, because that is the only way. Like, to create a new path, you need to create the new path. You need to open up the road. And there's people that have the natural inclination to be perseverant, and there's people that just don't. And, I think that big change belongs to the people that gets committed to staying until change happens. So if you ask me, like, what keeps me motivated, it's not about motivation. It's about the determination to stay until the change happens. And that's what has allowed me to do, I've been thinking about this 10-year challenge. It's 2019. And it's been 10 years since I did my research thesis that landed me to do Social.glass. So I came to Silicon Valley with the idea of Social.glass in 2011. It wasn't called Social.glass. It was not about productizing good solutions for government. It was about digitizing government little by little in some fashion. I didn't understand the productization power of Silicon Valley. And then I started at 25. I co-founded my first company, Myronet, the major drone delivery company in the world. And I stayed there until there was drone regulation that we helped shape, until we created the first drone delivery network in Switzerland with the first permit from the first aviation authority. We helped aviation authorities understand what was the protocol, what was the operations, procedure. We had some of the first waiver here in the United States for FAA to grant a process for us to fly over people or fly over an area where we were not supposed to fly. And that took time. And we couldn't do that before we did the first thing, and then the second thing, and then the third thing. That took time. So if you ask me, what have you done in the last 10 years? I can tell you, I've done 5 things. Not a lot, but I've done things that are breakthroughs, that for me are like, boom, big things that I set out to do in my life. I created, I was able to research something big, that is that it's impossible to have democracy if the organizations in charge of carrying out democracy are not democratic inside. Simple, but that's the research I did. That research landed me a Fulbright scholarship. But the research in itself is important. I wrote that 10 years ago. So then I was able to co-create the first constitutional court in my country. That's another thing. I haven't done a million things. I've done like 2 things there. And then I co-founded my first tech company that is the drone delivery pioneer in the world. Third thing, I was able to shape drone regulation that didn't exist in the United States. We did that 2016. Created the first drone delivery network in the world, 5th thing, and then I'm creating Social.glass. So, what am I going to do in the next 10 years? Not much. But that 1 or 2 thing I'm going to do is going to be massive, because I'm committed to staying until that thing happens. And I don't know what that name is, other than persistence and discipline. It's definitely not motivation, because in those 10 years, I can tell you how many that I've been low more than I've been high. And I've continued going through it regardless.
Well, Paola, that was an absolutely inspiring piece. And another word that came to mind was devotion as well. That some of this, it takes maybe a stricter mindset to that longer term goal. It also reminded me of a funny quote that I heard the other day. Something you'd mentioned is that societies often grow great when like the old men and women that are older plant trees under which they know the shade they will never sit. And this is kind of the opposition to what you were saying, is that some of this stuff we might not see as a full revolution in our lifetime, but there are these fruits on the tree that we can move with now. And I appreciate your perseverance as a very, very inspiring idea. Hitting these goals. None of those are small things that you mentioned either. Your work with the FAA in the United Nations. This is all groundbreaking stuff. So I'm very, very pleased to have you on the show today. I really look forward to seeing what Social.glass does. So let's tell the Bear family where they can find out more about you and where we can follow you on Twitter and the rest of your social channels.
Awesome. So we are at the Social.glass everywhere. Our website is Social.glass. They can get a glimpse of what Micro is, our first product, and understand how we are trying to productize amazing solutions for governments in the whole website. Our product is called Micro. We are always open to meet people, to have people contribute with us. Like, we have a team of 16 people that are fully remote. They all work on the things that they are passionate about. We have, designers, future of government thinkers, people experts in project management, people experts in education. Like, we have the whole range of people trying to look at a problem and solve a very simple thing in a very tiny way. But we think that if we crack this human behavior of how government workers adopt change, and they continue to do something right again and again and again and again, we wanna say we're tackling into the power of 10, like how little decisions aggregate and create a revolution. And that's our bet. And that's the type of people we want to be surrounded with, people that know the impact of their little actions. So, anybody that is interested, not in discussing governments, not in arguing politics, but on building the future of governments, I urge them to contact us, to be engaged with us in Instagram, Twitter, and not just in the virtual world, also in the actual real work that we need to get done, and to go to social.glass/careers and see anything that they think they have the skill set to help us to do, and to reach out to us. And we'd be more than glad to connect with them and to introduce them to our contributing team and see what we can do together.
Beautiful, Paola. What a great sentiment to end off with. So anyone that's interested, go check out Social.glass, find them on their social media channels. If you feel you can support their ideas and their cause with your similar passion, I think that's a great idea. It's a very, very important sector to be working on right now. I mean, between finance and governance, I think we are a little blockchain specific, but blockchain agnostic in this idea. What I think it allows is that the decentralization of power is just around the corner, and we need brilliant minds and hearts such as yourself leading the way. So I'm grateful to have you on the show. To all the Bear family out there, give us those thumbs up if you appreciate this content. Leave all your comments, your thoughts down below. I do my best to answer all of those. If you're new to the Bear family, please subscribe and do the same thing. Show Paola and her team some love by going to check them out. Paola, it's been an absolute treat. I will keep you on the phone for a few minutes before we dive off, but thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bear family, we'll see you again soon. Have yourselves a wonderful week, and I appreciate you all so much for sharing your most valuable asset today. That's your time and your attention. So see you, and we'll see you guys in the next show. Bye.